Hey there, your celestial piper, soldier of the watch. If you like this video, I ask that you go ahead and give the thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to this channel, please click on subscribe and then that notification bell. That way you're notified of new videos. Stay tuned. It'll work. All right, this is Danielle, your celestial piper, soldier of the watch. I have a special guest and friend of mine. His name is Luke Angstadt, and if I'm saying your name right.
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. And he is the writer of the book Musings of Daylapieux. I'm very excited to have him on. He's going to talk to us about his book and how he came about writing his book. And what is interesting that I didn't know, well, I'm on his channel sometimes doing a podcast with him and a couple other friends of ours called Knowledge Wars. So if you're not subscribed to that channel, you need to subscribe to that channel. I'll have the link down below in the description. But I didn't know this. You're a doctor of philosophy and a PhD in metaphysics and theology. Look at that's pretty impressive. I love it. It's awesome. So I'm going to head and give the floor to you. The subject of your book is definitely something that is of quite interest to me. And I'll have you all know I have not gotten his book yet, but I will be getting his book. So I'll have that link and information because it is on Amazon. Am I correct, Luke?
It is, yes.
Okay, great. So I'll have that all down below for you guys. So if you're interested, by all means, show Luke some love and purchase his book. All right, floor is yours, Luke.
All right, Danielle. Well, thanks for having me on. And as you mentioned at the beginning, I'm the author of the book, The Musings of Daylapieux, which is a 20-year investigation into the nature of reality, the nature of the universe, existence, human beings, God, and the relationship between all of them. And where this kind of got started was my entire life. I mean, since my first day of preschool, when I was 5 years old, and I was, thrown into that nut house zoo. I mean, the first time I was put into this group of people that were considered my peers, and they'd be with these large, giant adult monsters watching over us. I felt like I was being punished my entire life. Like I'm in a Kafka novel. I don't know if you're familiar with Franz Kafka, but above his novel, Daniel. But he was a German Austrian writer at the 19th century, early 20th century, and he wrote about these books where just his protagonist was caught in a story where he was just constantly being punished for no rhyme or reason. I mean, life was obvious. He found himself in this life that was just completely absurd and ridiculous and meaningless. And I always had that connection with the world. A lot of the, especially like the French existentialist writers of the first half of the 20th century, and a lot of that was the symptom of World War II, but a lot of it wasn't. A lot of it was our life is just ridiculous. I mean, you look around, there's no point, there's no rhyme or reason, and more often than not, if you have more than two brain cells knocking together between your ears, you're going to come across this. You're going to perceive this, and oftentimes you perceive this at a very young age. And I learned this at a very young age. At the first time, at the moment that I was able to formulate any kind of rudimentary thoughts and perceptions and observations in my head, around 5 years old, that I can remember, I thought to myself, this is just absolutely ridiculous, and I'm being punished for absolutely no reason or rhyme whatsoever. And I felt this power, I felt this control system. And then, in your 5-year-old mind, I mean, obviously I wasn't able to articulate it in words, but I sensed it. And I remember this because I have a very good memory. And I have memories from when I was 2 years old, crawling in my parents' first apartment. So I mean, so I have exceptional memories, but I mean, again, not verbally, but I remember, I can put myself in my child's perception and way of just looking about on the world, and I can feel it again. I mean, again, I had that impression at a very young age. I was aware of it from a very young age, and that awareness, that understanding never left me, even in its basic rudimentary form. And as I got older, it grew and grew, and it develops, and it becomes more refined as we get older. And I guess bringing you up to speed to the year 2001, I was living in State College. Wasn't at Penn State anymore. I ended up getting a Crohn's disease, and I had 2 national scholarships, and I ended up getting Crohn's disease, and I was in and out of hospitals for the first several years. But that's a whole other story. But keeping on topic with my with my journey of discovery. And in March of 2001, I was living in State College, and
And if you
it,
don't
it,
mind, I'm going to interrupt you real quick
oh, sure.
because I do have a lot of listeners or a lot of subscribers who, like me and you, have autoimmune diseases, and I just wanted to point that out that there are many people that could totally empathize with you on that. But go ahead.
Sure, just to give people a brief synopsis of that, I mean, Crohn's disease is when it's an inflammation of your intestines, and specifically my intestinal wall, where your body attacks itself, and then you have layers of scar tissue, built on top of each other, and then you get like a narrowing of a specific passageway in the intestines, and it can cause excruciating pain depending upon if you eat the wrong foods. I mean, oftentimes roughage, if you don't chew an apple properly, asparagus, nuts, and I try to avoid these. Not to say, I mean, I eat an apple here and there if I chew it up. I make an effort to make sure I chew it up and I don't swallow large chunks. But anyway, yeah. So that was excruciating pain. So anybody who has any kind of gastrointestinal problems would be able to relate to that. But, so back in March of 2001, I was living in State College, and I was living with some hippies in State College. And I came across on a coffee table in our living space, there was a book titled Dangling in the Torniforcia by Charles Bukowski. And Charles Bukowski, I don't know if you're familiar with Charles Bukowski, Danielle. Okay, but he was kind of like a hippie writer. I mean, he wasn't quite a hippie. I mean, he was one of those guys that kind of bridged well, not even bridged, but he was more of the beatnik era with guys like William Burroughs and Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, Gary Snyder. But Bukowski wasn't necessarily connected with them. He wasn't friends with them per se. They were primarily on the East Coast, and then they eventually migrated to California and Big Sur. But Bukowski was located in Los Angeles for most of his life. But in the 60s and 70s, and then 80s, he died in the early 90s. But he was a transgressive fiction and poetry writer, and he just wrote about the miseries and brutalities of life in a very funny way. He had a way of finding the humor in grim situations. And I came across this book, Dangling in the Torniforcia, again, March of 2001. I was 20 years old. Prior to that, I hadn't done much reading outside of required reading for high school classes. So I wasn't much of a reader until then, because I found most books to be boring. And a lot of that was just me being youthful. I mean, I found the Iliad and the Odyssey boring, but when you're reading them when you're 16 and 17 years old, I mean, I don't even know if that's the right age to read those. I mean, I think
I was
those
14.
Yeah, so I think that those books are more for a mature audience. But in any case, I mean, I didn't read much as a kid, but it wasn't until I came across Charles Bukowski that I really started reading, because I just found him, obviously I related to him. I related to his worldview, what he saw in the world. I completely related to him. He was just like an older, like a grandfather and uncle figure. And I found his stories very humorous, very insightful. His poetry, something clicked with his poetry. I've never been a poet, but his gift for metaphor, I found, was extraordinary. And as the more I learned about Charles Bukowski, I mean, it took him a while until he got published, and even by the time he became relatively famous, most of his fame was in Europe. And the famous existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wanted to meet him, but Bukowski said, go fly a kite. He wasn't going to meet him because obviously he wasn't a communist, and Sartre was a communist. Anyway, getting back to that, so Charles Bukowski is the one that really got me into. He really started to open my mind, because from Charles Bukowski I started, reading guys like Albert Camus, Dostoevsky, Louis Ferdinand Céline. He was another French transgressive writer of the early 20th century. Just because they were friends. I mean, it was a very lonely existence. I mean, I've always been a very thoughtful person, even as a kid, and that in and of itself alienates you, on top of just the rest of the alienation that you feel from living in a world that you don't relate to in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And anytime you try to broach a conversation with anyone, it's like, heaven forbid you ever talk about anything, because that's taboo. So I mean, I felt this fascist mind control prison my entire life. And again, as a kid, I didn't have the words to articulate it, but I felt it at a cellular level. I felt it in my bones. And as I got older, and as I started developing my verbal skills in my early 20s, and now I'm 40, I'll be 42 years old next month. I mean, as you refine your verbal skills, you're better able to describe it and articulate it. And my book was about the 20-year journey and investigation into understanding the nature of reality. Why is there suffering in the world? Why am I taught from such a young age that there is this omnipotent, omniscient super being in the clouds or in the ether, or just permeating all of existence, who he loves us, and he has this paradise waiting for us once we leave our temporal plane, once we leave this temporal plane of existence, so long as we give our hearts and accept Jesus, his son Jesus Christ, as our personal savior. But here in the right here and now, it's just a complete shit show. And I always knew that. I always knew that I was being lied to. I mean, every day in school, I'm like, what is going on here? I mean, why aren't there more people up in arms, and more kids and more teachers saying, enough of this tomfoolery? I mean, let's just start being honest. Let's just have an honest conversation and see where it goes. But I always felt this systematic, intentional power and control system being imposed upon me. And during I didn't really wake up to the specifics of the global conspiracy until 2018. It wasn't until I came across David Icke's book, Dangling in the, excuse me, yeah. David Icke wrote a book, Dangling in the Tour de Fortune. So I came across his book, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More. This was July of 20, it's a great book, isn't it? And I have like 12 of his books. And I know I'm jumping along on the timeline, but it's just kind of how the narrative flows, and then I can kind of fill in
And we're
the
so
dots.
limited on time, so it's
Sure.
what you need to do.
Sure. So in July of 2018, and this was after reading probably a good 2,000, 2,500 books. I read everything. I read history, philosophy, literature, psychology, you name it, all the religious tomes. I mean, obviously the Bible, inside and out, backwards and forward. I've read the Bible more than half a dozen times, cover to cover. The New Testament cover, the entire New Testament, more times than I can count. I've read the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada, the Vedic, the Upanishads. I mean, you name it, the Quran. So I mean, just studying everything. I finally came, and I wasn't able to connect the dots. But but it wasn't until I knew it, but I just wasn't able to completely connect the dots with what's going on this planet. But it wasn't until July of 2018, and I came across David Icke's book, Human Race, The Lion Sleeps No More. I was on vacation on the Big Island of Hawaii, I just went to this area called Waipio Valley, which is on the northeast quadrant of the island. It's a beautiful valley, and it's really hard to describe, but it's called Waipio Valley, Waipio Valley. And if anybody wants to check out some pictures on YouTube, but one of the most dramatically stunning, beautiful areas anywhere I've been on Earth. And out just on the outskirts of this valley is a little town called Honaka'a. And I was just walking, after I had been in Waipio Valley, I was just walking down the sidewalk, just looking at the views. It's obviously it's pretty, and I had nothing really on my mind in particular other than just admiring and still taking in the beauty of Waipio Valley. So I'm walking down the sidewalk, and I come across like a thrift store, antique store off to my right, and I take a glance to my right, and there's a small bookshelf of used books outside the antique store, and one of the books that was I didn't see its spine, but I saw the front of the book, so I was able to get a full profile of the front cover. Was David Icke's book, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More, and I have it right here in my bookshelf. So this is the book that I saw, and I saw that image. So you see that image of the lion with the earth, with the globe, and I thought to myself, wow, what a stunning image. I mean, and so the first thing that caught my eye was the image, but then I saw the title, the name of the author, David Icke, and I had no previous experience with David Icke other than for the fact that my best friend in Portland, Oregon, his name is Don. We've had an extraordinary correspondence over the better part of 10 years. At moments in our conversation, he had mentioned David Icke as the global conspiracy researcher who talked about the lizard people. And that in and of itself, I mean, it just goes to show how brainwashed we are, Danielle. Because I mean, I had scoffed at that too. I said the lizard people. I mean, it sounds like something out of like a Hollywood B movie. So it just goes to show how programmed any and all of us can be. But so at the time when my friend Don first mentioned David Icke's name in our conversations, I thought that, okay, that's great. Maybe I'll look at it later, but I didn't have any definitive time when I was going to come back to him. But at this moment in time on the Big Island of Hawaii in Honaka'a, I turned, I looked at the bookshelf, I saw that book, The Human Race, sitting there, and I saw the name David Icke. And the first thing I did was I I called my friend Don and I said, David Icke, I said, isn't that the guy that talks about the reptilians, the lizard people? And my friend Don says, yes. He says, and I said, because I said I came across this book of his, and it's massive, and the book, the antique store is selling it for $1.50, and it's in
Wow.
great shape. So hey, he said, yeah, you got to buy that book. I said, so of course I'm gonna buy the book, and I took it home with me, and I started reading it while I was on vacation still in Hawaii, and that's the one. That was the book that tied. Oh, I'm sorry, come again. I
Your
started.
mind blown.
Yeah. Well, not yeah. My mind was blown, but it also tied in. It tied together all the loose ends. I mean, because and it's not easy for anyone to tie together all the loose ends, and that's what it did. All the uncertainties, all the hanging chads, all the the dark alleyways of the mind that you went through, and they connect somewhere else. It connects to another dark alley of the mind, but you're not quite able to to bring them all together. I mean, that's what David Icke's book did for me, and this is another great anecdote from David Icke's story, from his life story. And he tells us in the beginning chapters of most of his books, and I find it very curious because it connects to the transformation of Saul on the road to Damascus, how Saul became Paul, the great salesman of history. And then he went on, obviously writing all those epistles to the Romans and the Corinthians and Thessalonians, and how he pretty much was the springboard for Christianity. But I'm gonna circle back to this because it also connects with Philip K. Dick, who was a prodigious science fiction writer, philosopher. I don't know if you're familiar with Philip K. Dick. A lot of his books have been turned into movies. But he had extraordinary insight into. I know I'm getting off topic, but because I am going to circle back to this. But so those three guys in particular, who have all three of them have extraordinary insight into the workings of the universe, into the workings of reality. All three of them had a Paul or a Saul on the road to Damascus experience in their life when. Well, we'll go back to David Icke. So we'll start with David Icke, and then we'll circle back to Philip K. Dix and Paul. So in 1990, and David Icke tells his story in like the beginning chapters of probably more than half of his books. And Danielle, if you've read any of them, you're probably familiar with it. But in Peru in 1990, so in 1990, he felt an intuitive calling to go to Peru. So he didn't know what it was about. It's just, I'm being called to go to Peru. So what does he do? He buys a plane ticket. He goes to Peru. He gets off the plane, I guess, in Lima. And, maybe he's just wandering. He just gets off, walks out of the airport and just looking around. And, someone comes up to him, and I don't recall exactly all the fine points of the conversation, but somehow or another he is led to some place on the outskirts of town in Peru to some kind of archaeological site. And I'm paraphrasing, I know it's not, but I mean we get the drift of the story. So he gets off the plane, he's led to some area in the countryside by an archaeological site in Peru, and when he's there, he has a moment where he fears a ball, just a bolt or something of energy, smacks him on the forehead, and also he feels the energy going through his palms, and he has his hands just standing here for like an hour or so with the energy hitting his forehead, it's hitting his palms, and he's feeling bolts of electricity and energy coming up from the core of the earth through the soles of his feet, and he's just standing there, receiving this message from the universe. And to say the least, I mean, the understatement of understatements, that's certainly a transformational experience. And that was like the moment in his life where all the fail-safe doors were blown wide open, and he just became a catalyst or a vessel for this esoteric knowledge and information that has been systematically suppressed by various secret societies over thousands of years. But that was the moment when the universe selected him. Let's put it that way. I mean, and David Icke has said this many times, more often than not in the beginning of his books, that he was selected for this mission. So it wasn't him, banging his head against the wall and laborious trial and error and labor to just poring over books to connect the dots. It's like, no, he was selected for a mission. And since we'll do Paul last, but so again, he had this where the universe is smacking information in his forehead, his hands coming up from the ground, from the soles of his feet. I mean, you can't think of a more dramatic, out of this world experience. And Philip K. Dick, who was again, he wrote 150 short stories, 45 novels, and in addition to that, he was working on. I'll show it because it's sitting here on my bookshelf. He was from like the early 1970s. He was working on something called the exegesis,
Mm.
of Philip K. Dick. And now this is 1/10 of the complete exegesis of Philip K. Dick. I mean, the word exegesis just meaning a deeper dive into the nature of the universe, and then but to expand and amplify and then just describing your insights after taking this deep dive into the very quick of existence and the nature of the universe. But so this book is about 1,000 pages, and there's about 9,000 or so pages of this exegesis by Philip K. Dick that he started in February of 1974. So he was writing this in addition to publishing 45 novels and 150 or so short stories. But the story behind this exegesis of Philip K. Dick is what the exegesis of Philip K. Dick was. He was describing something that he called VALIS, which is an acronym for a vast, active, living information system. And what it effectively is the internet. It's not the internet of 1993 or 1994. I mean, he's describing the advanced this international network of this web where everybody is connected to everything. I mean, it's pretty much the internet of 2015 to the present day. He's describing this in 1974. And he describes it over the course of 9,000 pages. And what opened him up to this was, again, he had a very similar experience that Paul had on the road to Damascus and what David Icke had in Peru. And that is that there was like a delivery girl came to his door one day, and she was wearing a necklace. I don't know if she was wearing one of those the fish necklace. You may know this story, Danielle. I'm not sure, but she was wearing some necklace, like a shiny necklace, whether it was gold or had a diamond in it or whatever the case may be. But she was wearing a shiny necklace, and the light of the sun hit this necklace, and then it shot a pink beam of light to Philip K. Dick. And again, he saw this pink beam of light, and it was mesmerized by it. And this pink beam of light was imbued with a personality, with consciousness, with information, with knowledge, and it was just speaking to Philip K. Dick. So this was, again, most people think this is crazy, but it's not. I mean, people that get this extraordinary insight into the universe, more often than not, they were selected for a mission in their present incarnations, and the universe selects them for them, and they have this experience where it more often than not comes down to light and light and energy and smacking them in whether it's their crown chakra, and then it opens up all their chakras. But they're having light and energy in connection with information.
Well, to say something on that.
Sure. Oh, sure, go ahead.
I think it's interesting because anytime I do meditation, if being an empath, I also try to daily put like a kind of a protection bubble around myself. And I always visualize rose gold kind of light. So when
Amazing.
You a pink light, there you go. I'm sorry.
And you're awake. I talked to you enough times, Danielle. So you've had an awakening too. And sometimes it might. I mean, mine wasn't nearly as dramatic as his, but we've had those, right? But we need something like that, and in our own personal way. I mean, the universe selected us for our missions too, whatever. And we don't know the full mission just yet, but you need that intervention. There needs to be an intentional intervention by the universe. I mean, the universe selects some of us for this. And
I asked questions, I was given answers, and it was like, boom, whoa, what's this? And then it was like leading what you said, dark alley, rabbit hole to the other rabbit hole, until like finally I was basically, God,
and it's humbling too, right? It's a humbling experience. For me,
it is.
Humbling. Yeah.
I had a 2-year dark night of the soul. It's like, when everything you thought you knew was true wasn't, although I think like you, when you were younger, I too was like, like a disconnect, like something wasn't right, I never felt like I belonged here on this planet. Never ever felt like I belonged here. So go ahead. I'm sorry. I just love
out. Oh, no. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's that's your personal testimonies are completely in line with some of these more famous guys that have had that. I mean, it's just because it's not that it's just they're famous. They happen to be famous because by the will of whatever, whomever, they ended up being famous. But we've had these very similar experiences too, and I'm glad you shared that, because that's how the universe talks to us. I mean, it's just how it talks to us. And so actually, so circling back, getting back to where, so Paul, when Paul was first Saul, he was persecuting the churches, and
Or to
I don't know,
Damascus.
yeah, I don't know if he was, maybe, I don't know if he was stoning and killing people too. I don't know, because the Bible isn't specific with that. It just says that he was persecuting the church, and but Saul had that experience before he became Paul. The road to Damascus, where Jesus, calls him out, and he's blinded by that light, and it knocks him to the ground, and then he has the scales on his eyes, and then later the scales fall from his eyes. But I found it extraordinary that Paul, and then he went on to write, all the epistles of the New Testament that just tied it's like Paul was kind of like the bridge between the Old Testament of people being ruled by the law, and having to kill your best ram or your lamb and offering a burnt offering or a peace offering or some kind of offering. And obviously it's very primitive, and people are like, well, wait a second. I mean, that's it. But that's what it was. Right. These people were primitive savages. When you have to, kill an animal to appease your God, you're a savage. Okay, that's just the way it is.
And the
Paul,
sweet smelling aroma,
yeah,
like
the sweet
the things
smelling
that they,
aroma that was
I'm like,
pleasing to the Lord.
yeah, it never
Yeah.
really, yeah. Go
And
ahead.
and that would be that's more time and conversations that it takes.
Yeah,
And but I'd love to
yeah.
get into them in pieces here and there. But
We'll
Paul
have to
was
have
the
you on
bridge.
again.
What's that?
I
Sure.
said I just
But
have to have you on again.
but Paul was the bridge between human beings being governed by law and being saved by the grace of God. And he wouldn't have, and a lot of this is so much of the epistles of Paul. It's metaphysics. It's
Right.
metaphysics that will absolutely blow your mind. It's where to even begin. Even Paul says, even one of the greatest things. He talks about how why why do our bodies have like a will of their own that is that is oftentimes completely contradictory to the will of the spirit, the will of the soul. We want to take care of ourselves, but our bodies, there's like a law of the flesh that keeps us stuck in bad habits, repeating bad habits and patterns that we're fully aware of, and we want
Right.
with our spirit and our will, we want to do everything we can to overcome these bad habits, but most of us spend our entire lives struggling with these bad habits. Why is that? And that's just one example, but so much. The epistles are pure metaphysics. They absolutely are. But getting back to this, what gives people, an ability to connect the dots with what's going on this planet, and getting back to my awakening with the David Icke book, is that it more often than not it requires an intervention on the part of the universe. And I even see that. The universe intentionally intervened when I was in Honoka'a, Hawaii, Big Island of Hawaii, of July of 2018. There's nothing. What's the statistical coincidences of that, of me just walking down the sidewalk at random, coming across the book that ties together all the dots for me, not looking for it, not seeking it out, not even, my mind wasn't on that whatsoever. I'm just walking down the sidewalk and enjoying my day in Hawaii, trying not to think about much of anything. And then that book, I just turn my head to the side, and it reels me in, and it ties together all the loose ends of the better. At that point, it was still a 20-year investigation into the nature of reality. So I guess that's the so getting back to my book, yeah, that's basically that's what it is. I've taken I take my direct experience of life, and I say to myself, okay, I see this world that is just ridiculous beyond belief. It's absurd. It's meaningless. There's no point to anything. I feel like I'm just put on this planet to suffer. That's pretty much my direct experience. There's no rhyme or reason. I didn't do anything. There's not even any cause and effect. And Philip K. Dick even talked about it. He said there's no such thing as causality. And again, that's a whole other subject. But I knew that it's like I'm not doing anything for this. I'm being punished for something that I didn't do for an
We have
indeterminate
10
time.
minutes, just so you know.
What's that?
We have
10
10
minutes. Sure, I
minutes,
see
just so
it.
you know.
Sure. Thanks, Danielle.
No, no problem.
Sure, but that was my experience of life. I'm put in this ridiculous funny farm prison of a planet to be punished for nothing whatsoever, just for the sake of being punished. So that opened up a lot of philosophical and psychological musings and investigations and conversations with myself that I wrote and became my book on the philosophical and spiritual implications of suffering, and how meaningless it is, and among other things. But so what I did was, with my book, is I took my direct experience, and a lot of it is my direct experience, and then compared with the authors and all the books that I've come across over the 20 years. And more often than not, I found their experiences to be very similar with mine. I mean, really, they find themselves in a ridiculous, insane world, and it's
Mhm.
like it's rational man trying to live in an irrational world, and that's what it was. And then I finally got to the end of 2020, after the lockdown of, so again, I mean, so you spend your entire life trying to have conversations with people, trying to reach people. And obviously it's like, no, why the hell would I listen to you? Why would I even entertain having a but anyway, that's something else. But I mean, so you got 20 years of trying to talk to people, trying to explain to them that there is some kind of, power and control system, bearing down on us. And not and more, it's bearing down on us, and it's been here for thousands of years. But trying to say that, listen, if we don't do something, if there isn't an awakening soon, I mean, we are going to get to a point of no return. But so March of 2020 comes along, and I had pretty much finished my book. But by the end of, I lost I've lost all connection with trying to describe this existence after March of 2020. I put some final touches on my book toward it in November of 2020. Part of it was a little bit of a speech that I gave in Philadelphia, with regards to, obviously, the lockdowns and the face diaper and all the happy horse shit that has transpired since March of 2020. But by the end of March of 2020, I have become so alienated to this reality, to this existence, that this version of reality that we live in, that I can't even describe it anymore. And I think I wrote that in my the introduction to my book. It's one of the first couple pages where I talked about Terence McKenna and Noam Chomsky. And Terence McKenna died. He was a famous ethnobotanist and studied hallucinogens and how he said mushrooms were the third gender. But he said, like, in 1999, that our world was about to be transformed by technology at such a rapid exponential clip that we wouldn't even be able to describe it anymore. And Terence McKenna, if you ever heard Terence McKenna, I mean, he is the most articulate, verbal human being. I mean, that guy never had a moment where he had a stop and struggle and pause and wrestle with his thoughts to put them into words. I mean, it just flowed like a river constantly from him. But
Yes.
he said that we are fast approaching a point where we won't be able to describe it anymore. And he said this in 1999. And then in the early moments, I think of was it I think it was in the early months of March of 2020, after the first lockdown, even Noam Chomsky, obviously the famed linguist, I mean, one of the maybe the most famous linguists of the 20th century, Noam Chomsky, said that what's happening in our world right now is beyond words. I mean, we can't even describe what's going on. And the full implications of this really sank in for me by the end of March of 2020, where I really literally couldn't describe it anymore, other than just rehashing the things that I learned in the previous 20 years. But really, just to sum it up, what's happening in this world is that the universe is a single living, breathing organism with billions and billions and billions of personalities, whether they're in human form or animal form or in rock form or anything. But it's infinite eternal consciousness permeating the universe, having an experience. And that's what it is. It's this big spirit, the big kahuna, call it God, call it whatever you want to call it, but it's permeating all of existence, all of eternity. And instead of just sitting in heaven and eternally twiddling his or her thumbs and using the unisex bathroom for all of eternity, this entity, this spirit, this consciousness with a capital C, creates this creation and other universes. I mean, I think there is an infinity of parallel universes as well. But what it does to occupy its time and just to have an experience of anything is it creates universes, and we call them simulations. But I mean, I think simulation is synonymous with the creation, with the creation, and it just create this infinite eternal consciousness creates more worlds than can ever be counted. In order to have an experience, because without this physical plane of existence, I don't think there's nothing. Infinite eternal consciousness in a vacuum cannot have an experience. And again, in the epistles, in the first epistle of John in the New Testament, I mean, John says that God is love, and that's a very abstract idea, and we lose track of how abstract and even maybe even obtuse that is because it's so familiar. But God is love. And so if God is love, to love is to know God. So in order for there to be love, there needs to be communion. So God himself itself cannot experience love just in and of himself,
Right.
just residing in some physical some formless void of darkness. God cannot experience love, but God more than anything else wants to experience love. But what goes along in the bargain is this veil of tears that is all of known that is all of known history of just untold, unconscionable suffering. But in order for there to be anything, and in order for there to be love, there needs to be communion, and that's where we're at here. So to recap, I mean, the universe is a single living, breathing organism with billions and billions of personality, individual points of attention, to borrow a phrase from David Icke, but we are vehicles for expression, for having an experience, and that's what it is. It's a game. You know, God, infinite, eternal consciousness is having a game, and along the road, there's just untold, unconscionable suffering. And my book gets into that. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
tells it anecdotally. I think it tells it with a lot of humor, with a lot of pain, with a lot of anguish, but again, with a lot of humor, because I find it just to be humorous as well, and obviously that's a survival mechanism as well. But it is funny. I mean, if you look at it close enough, it's deeply humorous too. So yeah, that's the quick recap of my book, The Musings of Daylapieux.
I love it. I love it. And I definitely myself, I want to read it. Um, it when you to say what you were talking about, when you mention the universe being a living organism and experiencing everything through us, that brings into the whole concept of duality and
Mm-hmm.
like that. I would definitely love to have you back on again just for you to share your thoughts with things like that. That would be awesome. Not
Mm-hmm.
away too much from your book, because I want people to go out and get your book. But
Mm-hmm.
it is mind blowing once you tap into that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still, because like I said, I had a 2 year dark night of the soul. I'm still, which we all are. I'm still walking this walk and learning and growing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
once you it really changes. It's not some gray haired, bearded man or love, whatever way you look at God. It's more, you feel more connected once your mind is opened up to the reality of it. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but yeah, so I don't have any questions.
Because words can't. I was going to say language can't sufficiently describe
No,
this experience, right? I mean, it can't. And until your point about feeling more deeply connected to what we label with language, God. I mean, even when after you went through your dark night of the soul, I mean, you come out of it feeling a deeper connection that really it can't. You know, it can't adequately be described with words,
nope,
but it doesn't stop us from trying, right?
nope,
Yeah.
nope. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't at all. So I guess what I'll do is we'll go ahead and end this unless you have anything else to say. We're about a minute here before.
No, I saw that. We just went under a minute, so just
Yeah, but
so we don't get cut off mid sentence. Yeah.
I definitely want you to come back on. So if you're cool with that, I'll have you come back on. We'll do another podcast.
Sure, I love that.
To have you again, guys. Check out his channel Knowledge Wars. I'll have the link down below, and be sure to go check out his book on Amazon. I'll have that link down below as well. And until we meet again, this is Danielle, your celestial piper, soldier white watch. I can't talk. And Luke Anks. You all have a great day. Love you so much, and peace out.
Thank you. We'll see you.
Here. Bye bye.
Bye bye.